Some of the most fascinating facts about the town of Maryland's only lake are those facts surrounding its origin. Scientists tell us that it was formed as the last glacier that covered our area receded about 16 to 18,000 years ago. Imagine a glacier at that time, at least 1 mile thick, covering us right here in Schenevus. That's about as high as if you traveled from downtown Schenevus, let's say at the VFW building, up Route 7 outside of Schenevus to where the truck repair shop is. And then you tipped that 1 mile up in the air. As that massive glacier very slowly receded northward, a large chunk or two of the glacier broke off and was then covered with glacial outwash. There they remained for years after the glacier had receded and very slowly melted and formed an approximately 28-acre depression in the ground called a kettle. Glacial runoff and springs filled the lake, and Schenevus Lake is properly called a kettle lake. The first people to visit the lake were obviously Native Americans, and the author of the 1876 book, A Concise History of the Town of Maryland from its First Settlement, Ashley Hotchkin, notes, quote, "In excavating around the lake near Schenevus, arrowheads, flint tomahawks, trinkets, and various Indian notions were found. Also human bones in such positions as the Indians bury their dead," close quote. We know Native Americans hunted in the Schenevus Valley and a little further west from the lake because evidence of camps have been found. Among the Native American scenes painted on the Chief Schenevus restaurant wall is this Schenevus Lake scene. Looking at maps before 1850, the lake doesn't seem to be noted on them. This 1856 large wall map, or this portion from a large wall map of Otsego County, does show the lake right in the middle there, but it leaves it unlabeled. The Albany and Susquehanna Railroad route planning map, probably drawn in the late 1850s, shows the lake and it's labeled Houghton Lake. You'll notice the north arrow pointing down as this map is upside down when compared to our usual orientation. It and later maps show a small stream connecting Schenevus Creek and the lake at the east end and at the west end. Additional research on the ground needs to be done in order to confirm that the easternmost stream flows out of the lake and the role that any railroad embankment sluices play in affording outlets to the lake. Two newspaper articles from 1898 and 1916 describe the breaking of a bulkhead on the east side that broke away. This was a bulkhead in the railroad bank, and that broke away and lowered the water in the lake 6 or 7 feet and made the lake, quote, considerably smaller. In the 1916 case, a lawsuit, one of these sluices in the east end under the railroad bed caved in and therefore blocked an outlet for the lake. In this case, the lake level rose 3 or more feet, covering the swamp with water. The construction of I-88 has definitely altered the pattern of route of South Hill streams and runoff into the lake. We see County Route 56 that runs parallel to and just south of I-88. It has a deep ditch all along its south side that funnels much of the South Hill runoff to a point near the Schenevus 1 mile exit sign, shown here with that black arrow, where it goes under I-88, then under Lake Road and into the eastern end of Schenevus Lake, a short ways east of the lake entrance. We can see a large concrete collection box with a large grate on it on the south side of Lake Road. On a nice sunny Monday this week, the weekend rains from South Hill were still loudly coming down through the pipes into this box and then being piped under Lake Road and down into the lake. It doesn't look like a lot of water coming out of that pipe after the Lake Road, but it was moving pretty quick. The use of the name Houghton Lake, as seen on this postcard, seems to be the oldest of the names used for the lake. It was used on the previously mentioned Albany and Susquehanna planning route map, but over the next 100 years, both Houghton Lake and Seward Lake were often used seemingly interchangeably. For some, they chose not to name it at all. The large wall map, as I mentioned, didn't have a name. And in Hodgkin's 1876 text, he has two chances to name the lake, but in both cases, he chooses to call it the lake near Schenevus. The 1868 County Atlas clearly marks it Seward Lake, as does the bicentennial map in 1895, the 1903 County Atlas map, the 1934 County Soil map, and the 1942 topographical map that we see here. Interestingly, the entrance road to the lake has a newer Schenevus Lake Park sign on one side of the road and an older Seward Lake sign on the other side. Continuing down the road just a bit, we see a big open field with a couple of picnic tables. This was an area that was added to the town's lake parcels a year or two after they bought the actual lake parcel. In the town's history collection, we have a large Seward Lake sign, very nice but large sign, that looks like it was hung near the entrance at one time. While less numerous and less official was the use of Houghton Lake, it does appear in a number of ice harvesting articles in the 1917-1918 time period. As to who owns the lake, this has not been easy to discover. Using the current, or the history of the ownership hasn't been easy to discover. Using the current tax map number, neither the county clerk nor the real tax office could trace when and from whom the D&H Railway Company purchased the parcel, including the lake. While searching for Schenevus Lake articles in the Freeman's Journal online archive, I discovered this February 1913 gem, appropriately entitled, "Who Owns Schenevus Lake?" Even a question in 1913. It quotes a Schenevus Monitor article that notes when Myron Bolson bought his farm just west of the village limits, he assumed that it included the lake just south over the railroad tracks. He therefore began charging for the ice harvested from the lake and collected a large revenue from the D&H Company and others. A 1900 news article confirms that they were purchasing the ice from Bolson. As the farm was turned over to Bolson's son Claude in 1913, two Schenevus men that cut ice on the lake for their own personal use challenged the assertion that they owed him a fee for the ice. Naturally, a Cooperstown lawyer was hired. He searched the records and reported, quote, "In no time past has it, the lake, ever been part of the farm which Bolson owns," close quote. And they therefore have no legal claim to the ice, to fees for the ice from the lake. A search showed that no lawsuit was filed, leading me to believe that it was worked out. Individuals and businesses used lake ice, as seen by this 1910 map of Main Street, Schenevus. You can see Ice House on the left with the blue arrow, Ice House on the right. On the right, it's behind a store that was labeled a confectionery and store. And on the left, I think maybe for the drugstore and general store, that was the Ice House. Another lawsuit in 1921 may provide the strongest clue as to when the D&H acquired the lake. One of the same men that sued claiming they shouldn't have to pay Bolson for the ice, Thomas Feary, asked that Judge Kellogg in county court levy damages to the D&H and force a remedy of a drainage situation caused by the railroad on his property near the west end of the lake. Documents show that in 1916, the company raised the tracks and widened the tracks near the east end of the lake, and also filled in the only outlet of the lake, one that led to Schenevus Creek. When a court required them to fix the overflowing lake, they found it too expensive to reopen the east end outlet, so the company bought some land on the west end of the lake and redirected the only stream flowing into the lake, the Manahoe Gorge Brook. And they redirected it away from the lake, under the tracks, and into Schenevus Creek west of the lake. This solved the problem for the D&H, but for Mr. Freary, it meant that occasionally overflowing Gorge Brook flooded his property on the west end and disabled his own water source for his house and barn. The D&H was refusing to pay recent damage bills. This long story seems to prove that the answer to the 1913 headline, "Who Owns Schenevus Lake?" was that by 1916, it was the Delaware and Hudson Railway. Incidentally, this suit was postponed on a technicality. Freary's wife was part owner of the land, and her name needed to be added as a plaintiff. Who owned the lake before 1916 is still a mystery to me. The commonly used names Houghton Lake and Seward Lake and the 1956 and 68 maps showing both those families owning property adjacent to the lake explains why the oft-used names Houghton Lake and Seward Lake were used, but it doesn't clarify the ownership question. And then there is a July 1886 Freeman Journal article that quotes an Albany Journal correspondent as saying the lake was owned by an Albert Barney. County records don't show Barney buying or selling land anywhere near the lake, and the same goes for Seward, Houghton, and Bolson. For now, the mystery remains of ownership of the lake before the D&H. By 1916, the D&H continuing to harvest ice for the refrigeration of cars that were carrying food and milk. Now they only had to pay a contract fee for the crew of men that was to do the harvesting. Often that was contractor T.H. Chapman of Cooperstown. And here's a help wanted ad in the January 1920 issue of the Oneonta Daily Star, showing that he was offering wages of from $3.75 to $4.25 per day of work on the ice cutting crew. A February 20, 1892 article notes, the contractor finished harvesting and reported excellent ice from 12 to 14 inches thick, and that they shipped 45 railroad car loads to the D&H Oneonta House and 10 more to ice houses east of Schenevus. That was in 1892. This work was dangerous, as several accidents were reported in the press, including foot and leg injuries, and even a death when 2 cars went into the lake. The horses used to clear the snow off the ice and to bring the ice cakes to the railroad bank and then to lift them up a ramp and into the freight cars, those horses were also in danger. In January 1899, one of the team of horses broke through and went into the water, but it was rescued before it drowned. Another team belonging to Myron Bolson wasn't as fortunate, as in January 1906, as they were cleaning the snow off the ice with a heavy scraper, they went underwater. The team drowned and were not recovered. The horses were valued at $100. So what some people thought was just a rumor of a team of horses having gone into the lake is not a rumor at all. With increased demand and capacity, by February 1929, almost 30 years after that 1892 article, Thomas Chapman, this was Chapman's son, reported that with a crew of 70 men in 7½ days, they harvested the amazing quantity of 9,000 tons of ice from Schenevus Lake for the D&H. The last article I found about D&H ice cutting on the lake was in January 1935, when Chapman directed the harvesting of 6,000 tons of ice for the Oneonta Ice House. Here we see some scenes of cutting, not on Schenevus Lake, but don't have any scenes from Schenevus Lake. This seems to be the most likely place where they would have transferred the ice. And an old timer describes the ice harvesting scene, quote, "a long platform with tracks on each side where the cars were placed for loading. This area seems the most likely for that to happen. The ice was hoisted to the platform by chain conveyors," the old timer said, "and they were powered by a steam engine. Dozens of these D&H boxcars could be filled each day. Here ice was being dropped into Here we see ice being pulled up a ramp, up the bank by a steam engine. This was a typical car that the ice would be loaded into. And here we see one of those typical cars filled with milk or meat, and they were loading blocks of ice, dropping them into the hole in the top, and then they would be maneuvered inside to either end or in the middle to cool the meat or milk. Good hunting, fishing, and bathing at Schenevus. Fishing in the valley was traditionally important as a source of food and recreation. In August 1883, Schenevus Monitor notes that Captain Walter Scott, Wirt McCrum, E.J. Judd, and Trapper Watkins drove to Schenevus Lake Saturday and captured 42 fine bass, averaging from 3/4 pound to 2.5 pounds. The Monitor editor adds, "The liars are not all dead yet." This September 1939 Star clipping shows Roland Card of Schenevus, later Oneonta, holding 2 prize-winning largemouth bass, 6 pound 2 ounce and 4 pound, caught at dawn at Schenevus Lake during a competition. The larger bass put up quite a struggle, at the end of which he escaped from the net, whereupon Card dove into the lake, clothes and all, to retrieve his prize. He noted, quote, "I would have gone in if I'd had a tuxedo on," when asked about his muddy appearance. Around the same time, we see Ray Banker on the left and Dr. E.C. Windsor on the right with their lake catches. Here's a 1939 hunting, trapping, and fishing license pin. I don't know if there was a paper license that went along with that. Years later, Town Supervisor Ralph Rowland noted that the eastern portion of the lake is protected by the state's Freshwater Wetlands Act, the middle filled with bass, perch, and bullhead, and the western end with underground springs. That's the designated swimming area, close quote. The lake has a long history of use for swimming and as a picnic site, which the picnic site prominence surprised me a little, with the two of them often combined. Examples, quote, "the warm weather's attracting the usual crowd at the lake for the daily swim" in June 1933. And in 1938, the school music groups met for a picnic at the lake. Individual families often had a lake picnic. There was the annual Sunday school picnic for the Baptist church. And there were field days in 1945, a swim festival in 1946, promoted by local citizens. Here's a photo donated by Minnie Beams. Minnie calls this "Our Moms." And this was in 1935, showing the women: Jenny Moxley, Alice Bender, Katie Borst, Grace West, and Minnie's mom, Ethel Apsey, on the right. Here's the lake's raft with a boat next to it. And here are some young people painting the raft red, white, and blue. And this was from the left: Cindy Beams, Kevin Smith, Rick Cornell, Mike Ender, Troy Adam, and Bob Adam. Here's a scene at the lake. Sorry for the cracks in the photo, but we can still see the concession stand in the back. Rene de Villiers ran that for quite some time. And barely in the back, we can see the bathhouses. I'm told there was one for women and one for men. Here's a little later from 1990. Vicky Velasco is up in the lifeguard seat, and lots of kids having fun. Here's a modern day look at the bathhouse. What would a lake be without some tall tales? In her 2002 book of recollections, Minnie Beams wrote, quote, "There was a story about Schenevus Lake that we were told when we were kids. There was supposed to have been a circus train derailed near the lake at one time, and an octopus had escaped from a tank and was living in the lake from then on. He was supposed to have been living at the far end of the lake. We decided that some parents may have made that up to keep their kids from swimming over there where all the water lilies grew." She added, "There were many things to do and lots of kids to do them with. We had the lake in the summer and spent a lot of time there. It wasn't unusual for 15 or 20 kids to hike over to the lake together to swim. It was as much fun getting there as being there." Close quote. 50 years earlier, the Freeman's Journal for July 17, 1886, featured a story entitled "That Old Sarpent." Based on a Schenevus Monitor story, it reads in part, "Local writers insist upon it that there's a big snake or some sort of animal in Houghton Lake near Schenevus. They say it's been seen by at least a score of people this summer. The Albany Journal even sent a correspondent, and he says that the reptile's over 20 feet long and 2 feet in diameter. Without a doubt, it's true. It's the general belief that it's a serpent at least 40 feet long. This lake's owned by Albert Barney, and he publishes an affidavit in the Monitor, which says he recently saw the monster, and he describes it, and he goes on to describe it. And for years afterwards, here's a drawing or a poor picture of a possible serpent. For years after, at least 6 different times, articles referred back to the monster stake in Schenevus Lake. And sometimes they poked a lot of fun, such as this Daily Star article in 1904, suggesting the monster could have been a large turtle, quote, "with imagination fertilized by squirrel whiskey." A summer rec program was opened, financed by the village and state in 1950, with swimming and swim lessons each day, 1 to 6, and free programs each morning at the school: basketball, baseball, softball, rifle range, archery, tennis, and other activities. There were free dances every Wednesday night. And a number of years later, the town of Westford joined Maryland, Schenevus, and the state in sponsoring the rec program. For a number of years, the Schenevus Rotary Club leased the lake from the D&H for that program. The D&H Railway still owns the lake, and by the 1980s, the Schenevus Rotary Club leased it for a nominal fee until 1989. After the settlement of a lawsuit between the trustee of the bankrupt railway and the former owner of the railway, the lake became available for sale. A state grant was obtained for $40,000, and the town of Maryland bought the lake in September 1992. More recently, 3 hiking trails, Chief Schenevus, Manatee, and Manahoe, have been laid out as shown here. And in 2016, the first Luke Hazen Annual Memorial Regatta was held. Here we see, I think these are the sprint portion of the regatta. Excuse me. The Friends of Seward Lake have been raising money. Here we see a sign posted as you come down the road, Heart the Lake. The Friends of Seward Lake have been raising money for the town's Lake Improvement Capital Project. This is a project funded by volunteers and donations to make improvements at the lake. The Schenevus Lake and picnic area parcels are assessed at a total of $140,000. The existing and potential value of the town is much greater than that. For you to appreciate the value, you only need to visit on a nice July afternoon and see and sense the enjoyment of the swimmers and the parents, or visit on a quiet October afternoon as I did this week and just bask in nature's wonder. Hear the geese honking as they take off together, or 12 of them, frightened by me getting too close, go noisily skimming across the surface of the lake. Scientists, of course, tell us that studies show the positive benefits of just 20 minutes among the trees and the water. Thanks to this work, I have a greater appreciation of our lake. Thank you.